I was 41 years old the morning my brother slid a pen across a lawyer's table and told me to sign away the only home I had ever loved. He smiled while he did it. He even asked if I had remembered to bring my own pen this time, like we were closing a business deal, instead of dividing up what was left of our dead father. My mother sat at the far end of that long table, with her hands folded, waiting for me to disappear the way I always had. What none of them knew, what not a single person in that room could have guessed, was that my father had spent 14 quiet years building something none of them could touch. And in about 10 minutes, an old attorney with tired eyes was going to open a folder and change everything. If you have ever sat at a table like that, surrounded by people who share your blood but not your side, stay with me for a little while. I only ask this once, right here at the start. What happened in that room is the reason I finally understood who my father really was. But to understand that morning, I have to take you back 3 weeks, to the phone call that came at 4 a.m. and split my life into a before and an after. My name is Corinne. Most people call me Corey. I am a wildlife veterinarian, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my days setting the broken wings of hawks and pulling fishing hooks out of the throats of loons that people have carelessly left behind. I live in a small apartment on the north side of Chicago, the kind with radiators that clank all winter and one window that looks out on a brick wall. I drive a 15-year-old station wagon with 140,000 miles on it and a heater that only works if you hit the dashboard in exactly the right spot. I built that life myself, board by board, and I was proud of it, even the clanking radiators. When my phone lit up at 4 a.m, my mother's name was on the screen. I already knew. You always know. Your father collapsed at the marina, she said. He is at the county hospital up here. Come now. I drove 5 hours north through the dark, through empty Michigan highways lined with pine, past the exit signs I had memorized as a child. By the time I reached Birch Lake, my father was already gone. A heart attack, they told me, sudden and total. He was 71. My brother's truck was already in the hospital lot when I arrived, a gleaming new thing that cost more than I made in a year. Of course, he had beaten me there. Preston always arrived first and did the least. I stood in a cold hallway that smelled of bleach and coffee, and I realized the last time I had spoken to my father was a phone call 2 months earlier that had lasted maybe a minute. He had asked if I was doing all right. I had said yes. Then neither of us knew what to say, so we let the silence stretch until one of us made an excuse. I never imagined that would be the last of his voice I would ever hear. To understand what happened next, you have to understand the family I was born into. 23 years ago, I was 18, sitting at our kitchen table with 3 college acceptance letters spread out in front of me like a hand of cards. I was afraid to play. I had worked for those letters. I needed my parents to help me figure out how to pay for what came next. My mother picked up the top letter, looked at it the way you look at junk mail, and set it back down. "Why would we spend that kind of money on you?" she said. "You are a girl. You will marry. You will have children. Your husband will take care of all of it. That is how these things work." I looked at my father. He was staring into his coffee, his jaw tight, saying absolutely nothing. That same year, my brother, 3 years older, and already halfway through a private university, got everything. Not scholarships. Check. They bought him a car so his drive would be comfortable. They rented him an apartment so he would not have to suffer through a dormitory. I got a printed list of businesses that hired teenagers. A son is an heir, my mother liked to say. A daughter is only a guest. I heard that sentence so many times, in so many rooms, that for a long while I believed it was simply the truth about me. So I did it myself. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked nights at an animal shelter and weekends at a diner. I slept 5 hours a night and ate cereal for dinner more times than I can count, while I watched other students go to parties I could not afford. I finished with honors, and I earned my veterinary license, and that license hangs on the wall of my small apartment to this day. I earned every single letter after my name. That is also why I stopped speaking to my family for almost 2 years after I graduated. I could not sit across from them without feeling the full weight of everything they had refused me. It is a decision I would later be ashamed of, and it is a decision my brother would later try to use as a weapon. Remember that. It matters. The morning after my father died, I drove out to the lake house for the first time in 3 years. It was an old 2-story place with cedar shingles gone silver from the weather, a wraparound porch, and a dock that reached out into Birch Lake like a finger pointing at the horizon. My grandfather had built the boathouse with his own hands. My father had inherited the whole property from him, and it was the one place on earth where I had ever felt like I belonged. As a girl, I used to lie on that dock at dusk and listen to the loons call across the water, that long, lonely sound that seems to come from somewhere older than the lake itself. Preston was waiting on the porch when I pulled in. He hugged me the way you hug someone you are obligated to touch, but would rather not, one arm, quick, already stepping back. "Long time, sis," he said. "You look worn out." I did not answer because I was looking past him at the hallway inside, where a wall of designer luggage was stacked next to a set of golf clubs and a pair of leather shoes that probably cost a month of my salary. My brother had been out of work for the better part of a year. I knew that because my mother mentioned it on one of her rare guilt-shaped phone calls. "Where is Mom?" I asked. "On the phone with the funeral home," he said. "She has everything handled." I carried my bag upstairs to my old bedroom, or what had once been mine. The walls were the same pale green I had painted them at 15. Everything else was gone. My bed had been replaced by more of Preston's things, boxes and bags and a television still sealed in its packaging. My childhood room had become my brother's storage closet. I stood in that doorway looking at a mountain of expensive things owned by a man who supposedly had no money, and something cold settled behind my ribs and stayed there. I did not ask why my room had become his closet. Some questions answer themselves. The funeral was set for 5 days out at the small chapel my father had driven past every morning of his working life. I handled it. I wrote the notice for the paper. I called relatives I had not spoken to in years. I chose the flowers, confirmed the food, made sure the little printed programs used the photograph of him from before he started looking tired all the time. The one where he is standing on the dock squinting into the sun. Preston handled the sympathy. Whenever a neighbor arrived with a casserole, my brother appeared in the doorway, wearing his grief like a tailored coat, taking their hands, telling them how much our father would have appreciated it. But behind the closed doors of that house, something else was happening. On the third day, I noticed my mother and brother kept falling into hushed conversations in the front room, the kind that stopped the moment I walked in. I caught only pieces. After the funeral, the property, handle it quickly. On the fourth night, I passed the kitchen and heard Preston on his phone, and his voice was not the smooth one he used for the neighbors. It was tight and low and frightened. "I know," he was saying. "I know. I will have it right after this. Just give me a few more days." He saw me and hung up so fast the phone nearly slipped from his hand. "Who was that?" I asked. "Nobody," he said. "Work." He had not worked in almost a year. I said nothing, but I tucked it away. One more piece of a picture I could not yet see. That night I could not sleep. So I did what I always do when my mind will not settle. I organized. My father kept a small office off the boathouse, a cramped room with a scarred wooden desk and 2 metal filing cabinets older than I was. No one had touched it since he got sick. I told myself I would start sorting, make myself useful in a way that did not require me to speak to anyone. The first drawer was decades of tax records and marina invoices. The second held old photographs and report cards, mine and Preston's, and a plain folder marked in my father's careful handwriting. Inside, I found my birth certificate, a few pictures of me as a baby on that same dock, and one sheet of heavy paper with a logo I did not recognize. Northwater Legacies Holdings, it said. Limited Liability Company. The date was 14 years ago. I stared at it. It was some kind of formation agreement, thick with legal language I did not fully understand. But I saw my own name printed in the text, and at the bottom, my signature. Loopy and uncertain, the handwriting of a 26-year-old. And then I remembered. 14 years ago, my father had called and asked me to drive up and sign some papers. Just some administrative things for the marina, he had said. Nothing important. I was young, still trying to believe the best of him despite everything. So I signed where he pointed and did not read a word. I had forgotten it completely, until now. I slipped the paper into my bag. Something told me to keep it close. In the morning, I found my mother in the kitchen and asked her, as lightly as I could, about Northwater Legacy Holdings. She waved her hand like she was clearing smoke. "That old thing dissolved years ago," she said. "Do not go digging around in your father's business. It will only upset you." So I let it drop. But I did not put the paper down. The funeral came on a gray Thursday, the kind of cold northern day that makes the whole world feel heavier. More than 40 people filled that little chapel. Neighbors, old customers from the marina, men my father had taught to tie a proper knot when they were boys. My brother delivered the eulogy in a suit I knew cost more than my car was worth, and he spoke about our father as if the two of them had been the closest of friends. He described fishing trips and long talks and a bond between father and son that could never be broken. The room wept. and I sat in the back listening to stories about a man I was not sure I recognized, wondering how many of them were even true. My mother sat in the front row in black, her pearl earrings catching the light, accepting condolences with the practiced grace of a woman who had everything under control. No one came to the back to ask how I was holding up. I was background, the daughter who had stayed away too long to matter. I thought the eulogy was the worst of it. I was wrong. The eulogy was only the opening act. After the final prayer, as people began gathering their coats, my brother stepped back to the front and cleared his throat. "If I could have everyone's attention for one more moment," he said. The room went still. I watched my mother give him the smallest nod, like a director cueing an actor. "Our family has been talking about what comes next," Preston said, his voice warm and rehearsed. "And we have made a hard decision together. We are going to sell the lake house." A murmur went through the pews. Aunt Carol put a hand to her chest. "The lake house," she said. "Thomas loved that place." "I know," my brother answered, shaking his head with what looked like real sorrow. "But the upkeep is far too much for Mom to manage alone, and she does not want to be out there surrounded by memories." He paused, and then he added the part that stopped my heart. "We have discussed it as a family. Mom, myself, and Corinne. We are all in agreement." I had agreed to nothing. I had not even been asked. I started to rise, and my mother turned in her seat and fixed me with a look I knew from childhood. "Do not you dare make a scene." Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked to the front herself. "I know some of you may be wondering about my daughter," she said. My face went hot. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me. "Corinne is a strong, independent woman," my mother continued, in the exact tone she used to use to explain why we could not afford something she simply did not want to buy. "She has a good career. She built her own life far away from us. She does not need the lake house, not the way her brother does right now. He has had some setbacks. He needs his family. I am sure you all understand. A son is an heir," someone behind me murmured, almost fondly. "A daughter is a guest." "Your father would understand," my mother said, looking straight at me. "Your brother needs the help. You will find another place. You always do." The words landed like a hand across the face. She had just told our entire extended family, standing beside my father's flowers, that I did not deserve a thing. And I stood there feeling 6 years old again, and I said nothing. Outside, in the bitter air, I watched through the chapel window as my brother shook hands with a man in a gray suit and accepted a folder stamped with the logo of a real estate agency. He had brought a realtor to the funeral. My mother appeared beside them, pointing toward the road as if giving directions to the house. And I understood, standing there in the cold, that they intended to show the property before my father was even in the ground. I took a photograph of that real estate agent's card through the glass. I did not yet know what for. I only knew that I would need to remember this exactly as it was. 3 days later, my mother called a family meeting at the house to, in her words, get everyone on the same page. 15 people crowded into the dining room. Aunt Carol, Uncle Ray, a scatter of cousins I barely knew, and my grandmother Vivian, my mother's mother, small and sharp-eyed, leaning on the cane she had used for years. She was the only one who looked at me with something other than judgment. My mother stood at the head of the table with a stack of papers. "Here is where we are," she said. "The lake house is the main asset, worth somewhere close to $750,000. I intend to sell it, settle the outstanding debts, and use the rest to see myself through my retirement." "And what about Corinne?" my grandmother asked. "Corinne has her own career," my mother said smoothly. "She does not need our support. She is still Thomas's daughter," my grandmother pressed. Aunt Carol cut in. "With respect, Mother, Corinne walked away from this family for years. You cannot vanish and then reappear with your hand out." "I am not asking for money," I said. "I am asking to be part of a decision about my own family's home." "You are part of it," my brother said with a thin smile. "You are sitting right here." The room laughed, that uncomfortable laugh people give when they are relieved. The cruelty is not aimed at them. Not one person spoke up for me. My grandmother caught my eye, and then, to my quiet heartbreak, she looked away. The real reason for the meeting arrived an hour later, when Preston slid a document across the table. Disclaimer of interest, the top of it read. "What is this?" I asked. "Simple," my mother said. "You sign it. You formally give up any claim to the house or the money from its sale, and we can all move forward cleanly." "You want me to sign away my inheritance," I said. "You are not giving up anything," Preston said quickly. "Dad left you nothing. This just makes it official, so no estranged sister turns up in 6 months demanding a cut." "If I already have no claim," I said slowly, "why do you need my signature so badly?" His jaw tightened, and for the first time I saw fear flicker under the confidence. Because the buyer is ready, he said. We do not have time for games, and if I do not sign, I asked. My mother leaned forward. Then I will tell every person in this room, and everyone who is not, exactly what kind of daughter you have been, how you cut your father off, how you broke his heart. There it was. The oldest wound I carried, the 2 years of silence I already hated myself for, and she was holding it over the table like a blade. Sign the paper, Uncle Ray said gently. Do not make this harder than it has to be. I picked up the pen, my father's pen, the heavy one, from his desk. I held it over the line, and then I set it down. I need time to think, I said. My brother's smile vanished. You have 24 hours, he said. I drove the 5 hours back to Chicago that night with my hands white on the wheel, and somewhere around the 3rd hour, in the dark between 2 towns, I stopped feeling small and started feeling something else. Because I kept thinking about that paper in my bag, Northwater Legacy Holdings, my name, my signature, my father asking me to sign and telling me it was nothing. What had I actually signed 14 years ago in a room where I trusted him? I remembered a name from the funeral program, an attorney my father had listed as a family friend, Nathaniel Boudreau. I found his number in my father's old address book, which I had taken from the office along with a few other things. And the next morning, before I did anything else, I called him. Now, I have to stop here for just a moment, because a lot of you are probably thinking the same thing. Why did I not fight harder that first night? Why did I not slam the table and dare them to test me? But you have to understand, these were my mother and my brother, the people whose love I had spent my whole childhood trying to earn. Walking away from them had already broken something in me once. I was not ready to break it again on nothing but a hunch. Nathaniel Boudreau's office sat on the 2nd floor of a brick building in town, above a bakery, with a brass nameplate gone soft at the edges and the smell of old paper and coffee. He was older than I expected, well past 70, with white hair and glasses that made him look like somebody's grandfather. But his eyes were sharp when he shook my hand. Ms. Ashford, he said, I was hoping you would call. That stopped me. You were. Please, sit. I was your father's attorney for 18 years. He and I had an understanding. I laid the formation document on his desk. I found this in his files, I said. I do not understand it, but my name is on it. He picked it up, and something moved across his face. Recognition. And beneath that, relief. Do you know what Northwater Legacy Holdings is? He asked. My mother said it dissolved years ago, I said. Your mother is mistaken, he said. He opened a drawer and drew out a folder so thick and so neatly kept that I understood at once he had been waiting a long time to hand it to me. Ms. Ashford, there is something your father asked me to tell you, but only when the time was right. My pulse climbed into my throat. What do you mean, the lake house, he said. The property on Birch Lake. It is not part of your father's estate. I did not understand. What do you mean it is not part of his estate? He lived there his whole life. He lived there, Mr. Boudreau said, but he did not personally own it. Not for 14 years. 14 years ago, your father transferred the entire property into Northwater Legacy Holdings. The house, the boathouse, the dock, the land, all of it belongs to the company now. Then who owns the company? I asked. He looked at me over the top of his glasses, and he spoke very gently. The way you tell someone news that will change the shape of their life. You do, he said. You are the sole member. You have been for 14 years. For a long moment, I could not make a sound. That is not possible, I finally managed. I would have known. Someone would have told me. Your father was very specific about confidentiality, he said. He did not want your mother to know. He did not want your brother to know. And he did not want you to know either. Not until it became necessary. He was afraid that if you knew, you might be pressured to give it up, or that knowing would poison what was left of your relationships. So he kept it quiet, and he kept it perfectly legal. But why, I whispered. Why would he do all of this? Mr. Boudreau pulled out an older page, the paper faintly yellowed. Because of your brother, he said. 14 years ago, your father came to me deeply worried. He had begun to see the pattern in Preston. The high-stakes card games, the borrowed money, the losses he kept hiding. Your father loved your brother, but he did not trust him. He knew that if anything ever happened to him, Preston would find a way to drain everything the family had. I thought of my brother's frightened voice on the phone at the house. I thought of the luggage stacked in my old bedroom. So he protected the one thing that mattered most, Mr. Boudreau said. There was one more piece that made it all possible. Your father did not own that property jointly with your mother. He inherited it from his own father before he was ever married. Under the law of this state, that made it his separate property, his alone to give. There was no mortgage. He had paid it off years before, so he was free to place it into the company and to name you. and only you as its owner. The transfer was recorded with the county. Every annual fee has been paid, on time, every year since. How did no one notice? I asked. My mother handled nothing when it came to the filings, but surely a tax bill, a piece of mail. Your father thought of that too, he said. The company uses an independent agent for its official mail, a separate box, a separate account. Your mother never touched any of it because your father never let her. And because nothing about daily life changed, no one had any reason to look. He set aside a small fund specifically to keep the company in good standing, managed by a neutral firm, so that it would survive him without depending on anyone's honesty. He thought of everything. I felt the tears come then, and I did not fight them. All those years I had believed my father did not care. All those silences I had read as agreement, as proof that he thought I mattered less. And the whole time he had been building a wall around me, brick by quiet brick, so that on the worst day of my life, I would not be left with nothing. Your father was not good with words, Mr. Boudreau said, but he was meticulous with documents. This was how he said the things he could not say out loud. He handed me a sealed envelope. My name was on the front in my father's handwriting, shaky, the letters uneven, as if his hand had trembled when he wrote it. He gave me this 3 months ago, the attorney said. He asked me to hold it until you needed it. I did not open it there. I was not ready. But I ran my thumb over the letters of my name, and something inside me that had been clenched tight for 20 years finally began to loosen. They will fight this, I said. They will say I manipulated him. Let them, he said. The formation was signed when your father was 57 years old and in excellent health. It was notarized. It was witnessed by his bookkeeper, Miriam Ostrowski, who is prepared to testify to his competence and his intentions. She was in the room. She saw everything. And there is one thing I want you to hear clearly. When we sit down to settle this, I will not bring the original documents anywhere near that table. Originals stay in the vault and on record with the county. We bring certified copies only. If tempers run high, and they will, no one is going to tear up the truth in front of me. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt something like solid ground under my feet. He asked me how I wanted to handle it. I could tell them privately, he said. Pull your mother and brother aside. Spare everyone the scene. I thought about the announcement at the funeral, about 40 people watching my mother tell them I did not need my father's home. They had chosen to do it in front of everyone, I said, to make me look like the ungrateful daughter in a room full of people who raised me. I would like the truth to come out the same way the lie did. Then we will hold a formal reading, he said. I will invite everyone who was at that meeting. The day before the reading, I went to see Miriam Ostrowski, the bookkeeper. She lived in a tidy house near the water with flower boxes in the windows and a wind chime made of old fishing lures on the porch. I wondered when you would come, she said, and put the kettle on. Your father talked about you all the time, she told me, setting a cup in front of me. Did you know that? Every time you passed an exam, every time you were promoted, he found a way to mention it. My daughter, the doctor, he would say. She made something of herself all on her own. Then why did he never tell me? I asked. Because your father was the most locked-up man I ever met, she said, with more affection than blame. He grew up in a house where feelings were treated like leaks to be sealed. He did not know how to say he loved you, so he said it in the only language he trusted. Records, signatures, a company with your name on it. She had been there the day he formed it. She had witnessed the signatures, helped file the paperwork, and promised to keep the secret unless something went wrong. And now, she said, something has gone very wrong. Your mother and brother are trying to sell a house that does not belong to them. She looked at me steadily. Your father was not a perfect man, Corinne, but in the end, he chose you. Do not let them take that from you. That night, my brother called. 24 hours is up, he said. Have you decided? I will be there tomorrow, I told him. Good, he said, and I could hear the smile. Bring a pen, we will get this wrapped up. I will see you there, Preston. After he hung up, I finally opened my father's letter. His handwriting climbed and fell across the page. Corinne, it said, I know your mother and your brother have not been fair to you. I am sorry I never found the courage to say so out loud. I was not the father you deserved. But I tried to leave you the one thing they could never take away. You are the only one I trust with what matters. Take care of the lake. Dad. I folded it carefully and slid it into the pocket over my heart, which brings us back to that long table and the morning I told you about at the very start. The reading was held in Mr. Boudreau's conference room, a wide space with a mahogany table and windows that looked out over the gray water of the harbor. I arrived early. My mother came in black again, the pearl earrings in place, and barely glanced at me before taking the far chair. My brother arrived 20 minutes late in the same expensive suit, freshly pressed, as if he expected to be closing a sale. He clapped the old attorney on the shoulder. "Thanks for putting this together," he said. "Let us keep it quick." Aunt Carol and Uncle Ray filed in, my grandmother, a handful of cousins, the same cast that had gathered to watch me sign myself into nothing. Preston caught my eye across the table and winked. "Brought your pen this time?" he asked. I did not answer. I smoothed the collar of the plain blazer I had bought with my own first paycheck years ago, and I waited. Mr. Boudreau closed the door and took his seat. "Shall we begin?" he said. He read the small things first. Personal effects to be divided at my mother's discretion. My father's truck to Preston. His savings, a little over $40,000, to my mother. My mother nodded, satisfied. My brother leaned back like a man watching a horse he had bet on pull ahead. "And the lake house," Aunt Carol prompted, "the property on Birch Lake." Mr. Boudreau paused. He took off his glasses, cleaned them slowly on his tie, and put them back on. I would later understand that every second of that pause was deliberate. "Regarding the lake house," he said, "there is a matter we need to address." "What matter?" my mother said. "The property on Birch Lake is not part of Mr. Ashford's estate." "That is ridiculous," Preston said. "He owned that house his whole life." "He lived there his whole life," Mr. Boudreau corrected. "But the ownership transferred 14 years ago. The property is held by a company called Northwater Legacy Holdings." I watched the color drain from my mother's face. My brother looked genuinely lost, as if someone had begun speaking a language he had never heard. "What company?" he demanded. Mr. Boudreau drew a folder from beneath his notes. On the cover, in my father's neat hand, was a label, "Property, certified copies." Then he laid the pages out one at a time, slow and even, like a man dealing cards. 14 years ago, he said, Thomas Ashford transferred the Birch Lake property into this company. The transfer was recorded with the county. Every fee and tax has been paid every year since. The property was his separate inheritance, free and clear, and his alone to give. "So the company owns the house," my brother said, his voice climbing. "Fine. Who owns the company?" "The company has a single member," Mr. Boudreau said. "One person with full control of it and everything it holds." He looked at me, and every head in that room turned to follow his eyes. "That person is Corinne Ashford." The silence lasted 3 whole seconds. Then my brother came up out of his chair. "That is a lie," he shouted, his face going from pale to red in an instant. "She manipulated him. She got to him when he was sick and confused." "The documents were executed 14 years ago," Mr. Boudreau said without raising his voice. "Your father was 57 and in perfect health. The signatures were notarized and witnessed by his bookkeeper, who is prepared to testify to his soundness of mind. And these," he added, tapping the pages, "are certified copies. The originals are secured. Nothing that happens in this room will change a single word of them." Preston snatched a page and scanned it, his hands shaking. "This is fraud," he said. "This is theft." "This is your father's choice," the old man said, "made deliberately, kept carefully, and entirely binding." My mother finally spoke, so quietly I almost missed it. "He never told me," she said. 30 years, he never said one word. "He asked me to keep it in confidence," Mr. Boudreau said. I honored that. And then my mother turned to me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Some mixture of betrayal and terror that made her look older than her 68 years. "You knew," she said. "All this time you knew." "I found out 4 days ago," I said, "after you stood in front of 40 people at my father's funeral and told them I could find another place." "Sikos, the house is worth $750,000, my brother said, and his voice cracked on the last word. "It belongs to the family. It belongs to the company," Mr. Boudreau said, "and the company belongs to your sister. How much do you owe?" Uncle Ray asked suddenly quietly, looking at my brother like he had never really seen him before. Preston said nothing, so I did. "Almost $400,000, I said. "Gambling." The room broke open. Aunt Carol's hand flew to her mouth. Somewhere a cousin swore under their breath. Uncle Ray stared at my brother in something close to horror. "That is not accurate," Preston stammered. "I have been covering for him for a year," my mother said, and her careful composure finally cracked all the way through. "I gave him everything I had. The house was supposed to be the last of it." She looked at me with wet, red-rimmed eyes. "Your father is barely gone, and you are going to take our home. Here is where I want to slow down, because this is the moment I had been waiting for my entire life. Not for revenge. I need you to understand that. I was not sitting in that chair, dreaming of watching my family suffer. I was waiting to be seen. To have someone stand up and say, out loud, in front of everyone, that I mattered. If you have ever felt invisible in your own family, no matter what you accomplished, then you know exactly what it cost me to keep my voice steady when I finally stood." I am not taking anything, I said. I rose slowly, and every eye came to me. I am keeping what my father chose to give me. He made that choice 14 years ago, when I was 26 years old, and he kept it a secret for 14 years. That tells me something about what he believed. It tells me he was manipulated, my brother spat. It tells me he saw exactly what was coming, I said, and I looked straight at him. He knew you would burn through everything he built if you were given the chance. And you would have. You brought a realtor to his funeral. Preston lunged, and for one ugly second I thought he might actually reach me, but Uncle Ray caught his arm. Sit down, my uncle said, low and hard. You have done enough. I turned to my mother. You can stay in the house, I said. I am not going to put you out on the road, but it will be under a formal lease. $1 a month, renewed each year, at my discretion. And Preston does not live there. That part is not open for discussion. You cannot, my brother said. I can, I answered. The company owns the house. I decide who lives in it. That is what owning a thing means. The room went completely still. I could see the old arithmetic breaking apart behind everyone's eyes, the assumptions crumbling one after another. Preston needs help, I said. Softer now. Real help. Not money to hand to the men he owes. Mr. Boudreau tells me a good deal of that debt was lent illegally. At rates the law does not even allow. And there are people who can help him fight it and get clean at the same time. If my brother checks himself into a 90-day program, a real one, then we can talk about what comes next. But not before, and not with cash. I picked up my bag. I did not ask for any of this, I said, but I will not apologize for accepting what my father chose to give me. Then I walked out. I made it halfway down the hall before I heard the tap of a cane behind me. Corinne, my grandmother called. Wait, I turned. She reached me and took my hand in both of hers, and her grip was far stronger than I expected. I knew, she said. Knew what? About the company, your father told me. He came to me 3 months ago, right after his diagnosis, and asked for my blessing. Her eyes shone. He asked me, do you think I should protect her? And I told him yes, because her mother never would. You knew this whole time, I said. Why did you not say anything at the meeting? Because it was not my secret to give away, she said. And because I wanted to see if your mother would find her way to doing right on her own. I gave her every chance. She did not take one of them. She squeezed my hand. But you stood your ground. You did not let them make you small. She patted my cheek the way she had when I was a girl. Go home, sweetheart. Let me deal with what is left of them in there. The rest I learned later from my grandmother and from Miriam, who had come to witness and stayed until the end. Because I want to be honest with you. I was not in that room for what came after, and I am only telling you what those 2 women told me. Aunt Carol tried to argue the company was somehow a trick, and Mr. Boudreau answered her with 14 years of filings until she went quiet. Uncle Ray took my brother aside and told him he was a disappointment, and my brother, hollowed out, did not even argue. And my grandmother stood at the head of the table, leaned on her cane, and said to my mother, You did this to yourself, Diane. Do not you dare blame the girl. My brother caught me in the parking lot before I could leave. The confidence was gone. Up close I could see the dark circles, the tremor in his hands, the look of a man who had run entirely out of road. The people I owe, he said. They are not patient. They slashed my tires last month. They follow me, he swallowed. I am scared, Corey. I got in over my head and I kept thinking one more game would fix it. And it never did. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, the man who had been handed everything I had to fight for and had thrown all of it away and still expected someone else to clean up the wreckage. And underneath all of that, I saw the boy who used to walk me to the end of the dock and teach me to skip stones across Birch Lake at dusk. You need the program, I said. Not the money. I know, he said, and for once I believed he did. Then we can talk, I said. When you have finished. 90 days. Not a day less. My mother was waiting by my car, her makeup streaked, the careful mask gone. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Did he leave anything for me? She asked quietly. Any letter, any word. I thought about lying, about giving her a gentle story of forgiveness that never happened. But she did not deserve a lie. She deserved the truth. He did not mention you, I said. Not once. She flinched as if I had struck her. 30 years, she whispered. I gave that man 30 years. He left the house to me, I said, not because he loved me more. Because he knew you and Preston would let it slip through your hands, and he was right. I was only doing what was best for the family, she said. You were doing what was best for Preston, I answered. Those were never the same thing. She started to argue, and then she stopped. Something moved in her face. Not acceptance, not yet, but the very beginning of it. I raised him the way I was raised, she said. A son is an heir, a daughter is a guest. That is what my mother taught me. Your mother, I said, seems to have changed her mind. She always did like you better, my mother said with a bitter little laugh. Maybe she just saw me more clearly, I said. She did not answer. She simply walked away across the gravel, and I let her, and I did not chase after her the way I had chased her approval my whole life. 2 weeks later, the firm sent me a package, the deed, the company records, and a single brass key on a worn leather fob, the one my father had carried for 30 years. I turned the fob over in my hand and found a tiny window in the leather, and behind it a faded photograph of me at 5 years old, standing on the dock at Birch Lake, squinting into the sun exactly the way he had in his own picture. He had been carrying me with him the entire time. I just never knew where to look. I did not sell the lake house. I kept my apartment in the city for my work, but I started driving up on weekends, clearing out the years of clutter, fixing the things my father had let go near the end. The first thing I did was empty my old bedroom of my brother's boxes and carry them to the boathouse. Then I painted the walls the soft green I had always wanted and never once been allowed to ask for. My mother lives in the guest room now, under the lease we drew up. $1 a month. We do not talk much, but we do not fight either, and some evenings we sit on the porch without speaking while the light goes down over the water, and that quiet is its own kind of peace, awkward and fragile and real. I have forgiven her. I want to be honest about what that means. Forgiving her did not mean giving her the keys. It did not mean pretending the funeral never happened. She lives in that house because I allow it, and we both know it, and strangely that honesty has made us gentler with each other than we ever were when she held all the power. My brother finished his 90 days. I did not visit, but I wrote him one line. I am rooting for you. He wrote back 2 words. Thank you. He is out now, working a real job for the first time in years, meeting a counselor every week, chipping away at what he owes with help from the people Mr. Boudreau found for him. I do not know yet who he will become, but he is trying, and for now that is enough to keep the door open a crack. On Sundays, my grandmother comes out with a pie, and we sit in the kitchen where I used to do my homework, and she tells me stories about my grandfather, the stubborn man who built the boathouse and whom, it turns out, I take after more than anyone guessed. In the last box in my father's office, under the old marina invoices, I found a row of small wooden loons he had carved by hand over the years. I had never known he made them. On the bottom of one, in careful knife strokes, he had cut a single word, Corinne, and a date, my birthday. I keep that one on the mantle now, beside a photograph of him on the dock, and some evenings, when the real loons call across Birch Lake, I swear the carved one is listening too. For most of my life, I believed my father did not love me. I read his silence as proof that I was not worth speaking up for, that I was invisible to him the same way I was invisible to the rest of that house. But I had it exactly backward. My father did not know how to love out loud. He grew up believing feelings were weaknesses and actions were the only truth. So he loved me the only way he knew how. He protected me with paper when he could not protect me with words. I used to think strength meant fighting back, shouting, demanding to be seen. I understand it differently now. Sometimes strength is patience. Sometimes it is building a quiet fortress so carefully that no one notices it standing until the day you finally need its walls. My father never once said the words, "I love you." But he wrote my name on every document that mattered, and he carried my picture for 30 years. And in the end, he handed me a home and a future that no one could ever take away. That was how he said it. And after 41 years, I finally heard him. So if you are out there and you have ever felt invisible in your own family, if you have ever been told that you are the guest and never the heir, I want you to hear this. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. And protecting yourself is not selfish. It is how you honor the people who tried, in their own quiet ways, to protect you. If this story meant something to you tonight, stay a moment longer and tell me one thing in the comments. Who in your life saw you when you thought no one did? I will be reading, and I will be right here.